Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So here we are back again talking about yet another situation. So apparently today is just the day of me coming across cursed information online. I say as if I hadn't basically curated my own algorithm to feed me that. But anyway, California pre-K teacher sparks outrage after he says childhood innocence does not exist, refers to it as a mythology, and claims toddlers are not too young for sexuality discussion. It's great timing that there's a siren in the background right now because that's how I feel reading this. I've talked about gender and sexuality here, especially back in the day. I really don't know what the whole fixation is with teaching children about things they cannot possibly understand. Now, there's certain things that you have to teach children in a dumbed down version for their own well-being, for their own safety, and that's fine. But having a conversation, is it even a conversation with a 3-year-old? Like, what do 3-year-olds do? Just like gargle and make noises? I don't know, but surely they're not going to respond to you and talk about the academia behind when children should be taught about sexuality. Okay, I'm already getting worked up. I knew it. A California teacher is under fire after attacking the idea of childhood innocence by claiming toddlers are not too young for the sexuality discussion. Also, I really don't want to be that person, but I'm about to be. Why is it so important for you to talk to children about sex? Because to me, being really this enthusiastic about it, I'm just saying check the hard drives. I'm just saying check the hard drives, okay? I don't know if anything's on there, but you also won't catch me being shocked if there is. And that is also a big part of why this entire story just makes me want to curl up and live in a shell. William Willie Villalpando, I don't know, who went by Mr. Willie Pre-K, we'll call him Mr. Willie then. Before it appears he deleted all social media profiles, referred to innocence as a mythology. Mr. Willie worked as a pre-kindergarten teacher in Rialto from 2016 through 2021, according to Fox News. It's unclear if he still works for the school district, but he is employed at Santa Ana College. There is a common mythology that children live in this world of pure innocence, and that by introducing or exposing them to the real world, adults are somehow shattering this illusion for them, Mr. Willie said. Therefore, there is a banning of topics and issues that children should not be exposed to, as if they're not experiencing them already. This might be the teacher in me, like I haven't taught for a while now, but there is no point in trying to teach a child that age about the complexities of gender and sexuality. Truly not. It's so layered, nuanced, complex, and then also full of things that are really up for your own interpretation in order to be defined. The reason why I mention this is that back in the day, even when I took queer theory at the graduate level, there were plenty of things that were difficult to understand because of our own takes, where you stand politically as well. Like, all of these things come into play here, so just acting like a 4-year-old is gonna get it is absolutely unhinged. I'm sorry, that is not based in reality for me. And it's also like, okay, you give them this information, what are they gonna do with it? They don't have the tools to even be able to digest that information. It would be the equivalent of telling a wall. A wall might actually be more receptive to it. But if you have to define every single term, ask a kid what gender and sexuality are. There are plenty of people my age who have a hard time defining that. Mr. Willie has spoken out repeatedly about the idea of childhood innocence and has blamed Christianity and white cisgendered people for shielding children, the news outlet reported. He claimed that adults pushing to protect children from lessons on sexuality and gender should deconstruct their viewpoints. Mr. Willie added that these discussions don't always refer to sex talks. Not talking about queerness in the classroom is not letting children be children. It's telling those people they do not deserve to exist, he said in 2021. Kids are never too young. The whole kids are never too young bit, along with my suspicions, does not bode well, let me just tell you. And kids are absolutely too young. There are plenty of things kids are too young for, and there's a reason that the sex talk occurs typically at an age, not necessarily where someone might already be engaging in sexual activity, but at least an age where they are aware of what sexual activity is generally speaking and aware of the potential consequences. I don't even know what kind of sex talk you want to have with a 4-year-old. Like, what are you gonna say? Do not get me started on the queerness topic. Truly, there is nothing wrong with discussing queerness as a general concept. That has to happen when your audience can receive that information. If you try to define queerness for a child, it's going to lead absolutely nowhere. It actually might confuse them further, because I do think that children need to have very basic, quote unquote, stable ideas, in the sense of ideas that are ingrained in their mind before you add layers of nuance, right? There's a reason that when you're a little kid, you're taught things in very broad ways, and then as you get older, you learn the details that you know how to process. But even as someone who took queer theory, the definitions of queerness vary depending on who you ask, what years we're talking about. Like, there is so much to be discussed there. So not telling 4-year-olds about queerness is not saying that you think that queer people shouldn't exist. It's addressing the reality that there is no point of trying to give children ideas that they can't work with. Mr. Willie further insisted that children can have a sense of their gender identity at 3 to 4 months. Around 3 to 4 months, infants show a sex and gender preference in who they look at. He added, at 3 years old, a child can label their own perceived gender identity. By 4 years old, children have a stable sense of their gender identity and have assumptions and beliefs of what they can and cannot do based on their gender, i.e. dolls are for girls, cars are for boys. Now again, these are conversations you can have with other adults. And granted, I do think there is a valuable conversation to be had in terms of letting kids play with the toys they want. I do agree that as an overall notion, the gendering of toys is dumb. So if you want to tell kids play with whatever toy you want and that there's no such thing as a boy toy or a girl toy, that works. Just leave it at that though, because that's something they can understand at least. But these completely abstract concepts, you have to be delusional to think a 4-year-old's gonna be like, oh, okay, I get it. Mr. Willie argued that shielding children from the discussion can lead to them becoming confused about their own sexuality. Parents haven't already had conversations about these things with their kids that kids don't know. That they might be intersex, that they might be a gender non-binary. And really, children have a right to see themselves in our classrooms. It's not okay to forget about them or push them out just because it might make us uncomfortable or make others uncomfortable. The pre-K teacher added that the teachings help students learn at a young age to ask others for their pronouns. Mr. Willie also appeared on a number of podcasts, including the Play-Based Learning podcast about gender and sexuality. This is a whole mess. This is truly a mess. It always goes back to the same thing that I'm basically saying. My main thesis argument here is that children have to have general notions in mind before you complicate those notions, because realistically, 4-year-olds are not going to know about social norms, social constructs, the dynamics between men and women, from in the workplace to in the bedroom. Like, these are all things that they have no real understanding of. So if they don't have an understanding of the basic premise, how are they going to understand things that are based off the basic premise? Does that make sense? So if these children don't necessarily internalize or think about the fact that most societies are heteronormative, most societies live with the expectation of man finding woman and they get together. So then already talking about anyone who is outside of heterosexuality is already complicated. As a general notion, there are a lot of layers, so it's complex, right? If they barely understand the notion of heterosexuality to begin with, what are you going to tell them about everything else? Speaking for myself, I'm glad that I didn't force myself to really investigate where I stood on the whole sexual orientation thing. The bi thing, I figured it out also because of experiences that I had. And that's, I think, how most people figure shit out. You have experiences and you're like, okay, that's something that I enjoyed, that's something I didn't enjoy, and from there you build. But it's not like you just sit with it and you're like, oh yeah, I'm this. It's a lot more complicated than that. I wish we just had a little box we could tick and be like, oh, turns out I'm bi. Okay. That's not how it is. And especially with these children who have no frame of reference. 4-year-olds haven't even had their first serious crush, I say in many quotation marks, remembering me at 16. Yikes. So, I mean, what are they going to even base any of this information on, aside from the fact that most information retention, in my opinion, is based on an aspect of not only interest, but how much you might relate to it and how it affects you, right? Because talking about gender identity and sexuality affects everyone. But it's like, if you don't know what your gender identity is, other than like what you're assigned at birth, if you don't know what your sexual orientation is because you're that young, what the fuck are we gonna tell you about that then? Like, what? I'm all for an open dialogue, so long as we're not living in fantasy land where we think 4-year-olds are ready for that. The contentious topic about gender identity in K-12 schools has been going on in the US. Last month, a high school history teacher in California has admitted to helping students change their gender identity without their parents' knowledge. Olivia Garrison, who is non-binary, told the New York Times that they felt it was their job as a teacher to protect kids, sometimes from their own parents. My job, which is a public service, is to protect kids, Garrison said. Sometimes they need protection from their own parents. So I'm not going to go on into this one teacher's whole thing, but what I am going to say is that when we talk about protecting children, I really do think what we should be talking about is protecting children from danger. So yes, a teacher's role is complicated, especially with young children like this, because if there are signs of abuse, if there are signs of genuine problems with a child's well-being, you have to step in. I completely agree with that. That's what I think of when we say protecting children. I think of children being abused, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically, whatever. And that's the main thing. I don't think we should throw around protecting kids when we're talking about gender identity and ideologies, unless they are racist ideologies, discriminatory ideologies that the parents are projecting onto them. This entire thing of taking children's lives into your own hands when you're the teacher, under these circumstances, to me reads as a bit of a savior complex more than anything. And it also makes me think you're not really concerned about the children. And that's what I think about this teacher as well, Mr. Willie. I don't really think it's for the well-being of children. That might be me being cynical and having absolutely no faith in humanity. But truly, I don't think that's why this person is very focused on children learning about sex and gender. I think there's something more self-serving behind it, and I really don't want to stray too far in that direction, because if I think of the self-serving reasons someone might have, none of them have a good ending. You guys can let me know. Let me know if there's an age where you think these conversations should be happening. I don't have a set age in mind. Honestly, I think somewhere along the lines of early teens, and then as time goes on, the discussions can become more nuanced, but at least a point where the person that you're talking to, the teenager, can in some ways internalize and process what you're saying and make up their own minds about it, as opposed to just absorbing that information without the capability of saying, okay, wait, do I agree with this? How do I feel about this? So on and so forth. You guys can let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.